There is a deck board I pulled off a pile destined for the skip. It was gray, cracked along the grain, and dried out like driftwood. It is the kind of board most people look at and say, yeah, that's done. I mixed three things in a jar for 30 seconds and wiped it on with a rag. Within 10 minutes, the gray was gone. The grain was back. The wood looked like it had just come out of a lumber yard. It cost $2 of materials. And you should stick around because near the end of this video, I am going to give you a second recipe. A $5 version for indoor wooden furniture that uses a different formula entirely. I will explain exactly why you cannot use the outdoor recipe inside because it will stain and ruin what you are trying to restore. Two recipes, two completely different jobs, one video. Let's go. You already know what happens to wood left outside. That silver gray color creeps across a fence over 2 or 3 summers. The rough surface catches your hand on a deck board. The way the grain opens and checks makes the wood start to look more like something dug up than something built. That is not rot, that is dehydration. Wood fibers, when the tree was alive, were full of oils and resins produced by the tree itself. You cut the tree, mill the boards, and install them outside, and year by year, sun and rain leach those oils out. The fibers dry, the surface oxidizes, and the grain opens. The wood goes gray and looks dead. It isn't dead, it is thirsty. What you are about to make feeds it back. You need a penetrating oil to rehydrate the fibers, a solvent to carry that oil deep into the grain rather than letting it sit on top, and an acid to lift the oxidation before the oil goes in. 3 ingredients, each doing a specific job. And here's the part that gets me. Arab craftsmen were using a version of the same formula, linseed oil, turpentine from wild pistachio trees, and mineral pigments to preserve and color wood as far back as the early Middle Ages. The blue doors, shutters, and window frames of Greece, the Greek islands, and North Africa. That particular blue that is instantly recognizable as Mediterranean. That tradition goes back to a linseed oil and turpentine base applied to protect wood against brutal sun and salt air. A version of this mixture has been keeping outdoor wood alive in some of the harshest climates on Earth for over 1,000 years. The 3 ingredients in your jar have not changed. Here is what you need. First, boiled linseed oil. This is the oil that does the deep work. It penetrates wood fibers, rehydrates them, and as it cures, it polymerizes inside the grain and seals from within. You must use boiled linseed oil, not raw, which cures in 24 to 48 hours. It costs about $8 to $10 a liter at any hardware store, and you will use only a fraction per project. Second, real turpentine, not mineral spirits. This is distilled from conifer resin, the substance a tree produces when wounded to repel insects and prevent fungal infection. In this mixture, it thins the linseed oil so it penetrates deeper and brings its own mild antifungal properties to the treatment. Smell it in the store? Real turpentine smells like a pine forest. That is the one you want. Third, white distilled vinegar, which is $1 at any grocery store. The acetic acid lifts oxidation, dissolves surface grime, and opens the wood for the oil to follow. Mix equal parts of each in a glass jar, not plastic, because turpentine reacts with some plastics. Shake hard for 30 seconds. It will separate as it sits, so shake again before each use. The total material cost for a first batch covering a serious amount of outdoor wood is about $2 of materials from what you likely already have, or roughly $20 to buy everything new, with enough left over for many future batches. Here is how it goes together. Wipe the wood down with a clean rag to remove loose dirt. No sanding and no stripping. That is the point. Apply the mixture with a cotton rag or old brush, working in the direction of the grain. Use a generous amount because weathered wood is dry and it wants to drink. The gray surface will begin shifting almost immediately as the vinegar lifts the oxidation and the oil starts darkening the grain. Work it in with firm strokes along the grain. Let it sit for 10 to 15 minutes, then wipe off the excess with a clean, dry rag. What has soaked in stays in, but what is still sitting on the surface needs to come off. Any excess left behind will cure into a tacky film that attracts dust and grime. Wait 24 hours. For severely weathered wood, a second coat at this point takes the result from good to genuinely remarkable. Now here's the part I didn't mention yet, and it is the thing that takes this from good to genuinely impressive. Apply it warm. Set your sealed jar in a bowl of hot water for 10 minutes before you use it. The mixture doesn't need to boil. It just needs to be warm, around the temperature of a hot bath. Warm linseed oil has a dramatically lower viscosity than cold oil, which means it flows into the grain instead of sitting at the surface. The Wooden Boat Forum, one of the most serious traditional woodworking communities online, specifically documents applying this mixture heated to near boil on badly dried timber. The penetration difference compared to cold application is significant enough that experienced craftsmen consider it non-negotiable on heavily weathered wood. 10 minutes in a bowl of hot water costs nothing, and it changes everything about how deep the oil goes. Here is the one thing people get wrong. They rush the wipe-off. The rule is simple. If the surface still feels oily after wiping, keep wiping. 15 minutes of patience here determines most of the final result. One safety note that actually matters. Oil-soaked rags with linseed oil can self-ignite as the oil cures and generates heat. This has caused real fires. When you are done, spread used rags flat outside to dry completely. Do not bunch them in a pile or put them in a bin. Keep them flat in open air until fully dry. Then dispose of them safely. Now for the indoor version, and this matters. By now you have figured out that everything above is for outdoor and weathered wood, such as decks, fences, garden furniture, and exterior siding. That recipe has vinegar in it. The Smithsonian Institution's senior furniture conservator has documented that linseed oil combined with acetic acid, which is what vinegar is, polymerizes into a dark, gummy layer on finished interior surfaces that becomes extremely difficult to remove. Do not use the outdoor recipe on indoor furniture, floors, or finished wood. It will stain and ruin what you are trying to restore. The indoor version is a different formula, and it is arguably more beautiful. Use equal parts pure tung oil and beeswax with just enough real turpentine to bring it to a workable consistency. Roughly half a part turpentine to every one part of the other two. Melt the beeswax gently in a double boiler or a jar set in hot water. Stir in the tung oil until fully combined, add the turpentine, and let it cool into a soft paste. That is it. Tung oil is pressed from the nut of the tung tree, native to China, and has been used as a wood finish in Chinese furniture, making for over 1,000 years. It penetrates deeply, cures to a hard, flexible film inside the grain, and produces a warm, natural sheen that commercial varnishes cannot replicate. The beeswax seals the surface and gives it a soft depth that looks genuinely handmade, because it is. Sam Malouf, the American woodworker whose rocking chairs sold for 5 figures and are held in the permanent collection of the White House and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, used a version of tung oil and beeswax as his primary finish for decades. Apply the paste with a cotton cloth, working it into the grain the same way as the outdoor version. Let it sit for 10 minutes, then buff it off with a clean cloth using light circular pressure. The warmth from the buffing slightly remelts the wax and drives it into the surface. One coat is often enough for a restored piece, but 2 coats on raw or very dry indoor wood produces something extraordinary. The total cost for the indoor paste is about $5 with materials that last many batches. There are no solvents or fumes worth worrying about, making it safer for surfaces that will be touched, sat on, and eaten off. The thing about both of these recipes is how long versions of them have been quietly doing this job. This was before the hardware store had an entire aisle dedicated to deck stains, furniture polishes, and branded bottles. Before contractors charged $2,000 to resurface a grayed-out deck, craftsmen, farmers, and builders were mixing linseed oil and turpentine in back sheds, and cabinet makers were rubbing beeswax and oil into furniture by hand. It kept wood alive, it was cheap, and it was made from what was available. Then the hardware store aisle arrived and nobody passed the recipes down anymore. Your deck doesn't know the difference between a branded product in this jar. Your dining table doesn't read labels. They just know whether they got fed or not. I don't know what your situation is or why you're watching this. Maybe it is a deck that has been graying out for a couple of summers. Maybe it is an old piece of furniture that deserves better than what it has been getting. Maybe you just like knowing you can fix something yourself for $2 that a contractor would charge you $2,000 to resurface. It doesn't matter. It works either way. Now you know how. If this story changed the way you look at the weathered wood in your life, please subscribe and like the channel. We are dedicated to uncovering the traditional methods in history that the modern world has tried to bury. Let's preserve the past to build a better future. Our next restoration secret will be revealed very soon.